I think that I've noticed a lot in the news, the way that this story is being pushed by a lot of media is this whole white supremacy angle. So, taking what Hotep Sophia was just talking about, would you agree that there is bias on the side of the news to push this particular agenda as opposed to seeing it from a more nuanced perspective?
Well, I think whenever you have somebody cross state boundaries with a gun to go to a rally in the intent to shoot people, no matter if they're white or black, something is wrong. And there's a reason. Maybe the reason that there was no black people shot is because there were no black people around when he started shooting. I don't think that he...
But going to the motive, though, but let's go to the motive, though, as far as the shooting goes, because from what I was able to see in the video footage, the first time people were charging at him, this one guy was throwing the bag at him. He was much taller and bigger than Kyle was. And if he's being chased, and if you're in a situation where you are being chased, what choice, like if you were in that situation, Tom, what would be your plan of action? Both the first time and the second time, which is a much higher quality video, where they were chasing him down, the one guy threw the skateboard at him, the other guy kicked him. Well, if you, Tom, were in that situation, what would you personally do?
I have no idea what his intentions were.
No, you just stated his intentions when you said he crossed state lines to go shoot people.
Well,
that was fucking disingenuous.
May I just say something?
A lot of people fucking did that. The dude who was chasing him had a gun. The dude who got his arm blown off.
I'd like to point out something. He crossed state lines, but it's literally right on the border, and he traveled a distance of 16 miles.
With a loaded gun to go to a Black Lives Matter rally, pretty much.
Well, they're burning everyone's property.
Hold on a second. Let's get our facts straight over here. He was going to a gas station that he was patrolling, and a friend of mine was actually there, and he was interviewing him. But beyond that, let's actually get rid of that for a second, because I don't want to jump from one island to another. I really want to just focus just right now on if you were in the position of this guy, and people were charging at you, and somebody knocked you with a skateboard, and somebody kicked you to the ground, and you were on the ground, what would you personally do at that point?
We've clearly reached the point of fucking civil war. So if you're surprised people are showing up with guns...
Hold on, Yakov, hold on. Tom, I really want to get an answer to this question. I think this is the crux of a lot of the different ways people are looking at this. Because if you were...
Okay, so what you're trying to say is this guy had no intentions of doing anything wrong when he came to that rally.
Forget intentions. We're literally talking about if you're running away and somebody kicks you, what do you do?
Hit him with a skateboard, so that gave him the right to kill two people?
He was being mobbed by a bunch of people who wanted to kill him. He was being mobbed by a circle of fucking people.
Yeah.
I'll put
one
the video
guy literally
up right
had a gun. I think it's, I just want to say, and I didn't tweet about this, but I just want to say how hilariously ironic it is that the guy that got his arm blown off, the tendons were severed, and he physically couldn't let go of the gun that was in his hand. If you look at the pictures, he had a gun clasped in his right hand.
Yes.
That he was charging at the guy.
Is also a felon, and that is an illegal weapon that he's holding clutched in his hand.
Yes. And the other guy that got killed was a convicted child rapist, right?
So
he was on the sex offender.
Yeah, they were all criminals.
Okay,
Did he know
here's
that?
the video.
He shot him?
Are you watching the video? Okay, so here he is. He's being chased down. You see the people are chasing him. So imagine you, regardless of whatever motive you happen to have before, you're being chased like this. What do you do? Will you just stand back and not do anything? This is I think, a very important question to ask. What would you do in this situation? It's right there. There's no trickery here. There's no magic. You're seeing the video. You're seeing what's going on. So again, what would you do in that situation if you're being chased down, if you're being hit with a skateboard, if you're being kicked, and you want to, you don't want to die? Because there were situations before where people have died when this was done to them. So what would you personally do, Tom?
You know what? I wouldn't put myself in the situation to be there with a loaded gun.
No,
I mean, if he was trying to incite something...
That's besides the point. We're talking about justice. We're talking about self-defense. This is the topic of the show. So regardless of whatever you would put yourself into, if you're in that situation, what would you do? Because you have two choices.
You know,
either you don't defend yourself or you defend yourself.
Is that what this is? I mean, this is trying to find a defense of the guy that shot those two people?
If you're in a situation where people are beating you up, like, I don't know.
Okay. All right. I mean, if this is what... You know, if this is what
that's
you brought
what it comes
me into,
down to.
I guess...
No, that's what it comes down to, I think, for a lot of people.
I'm not going to say that the guy was right for shooting the two people. I mean, if he didn't want to be if he didn't want to be in the situation, why was he there?
But forget why he was there. What's the alternative if you're being beat up, if you're being chased down? What's the alternative except for defending yourself?
So you're saying that the whole reason that he shot those people is because his life was in danger?
Yes.
That's how it works, you idiot.
Okay, no name
Fuck
calling.
You,
no
idiot.
name calling.
I'm not coming on here.
No.
I'm not coming on here for you fuckers to be calling me names.
Yeah. No, Yakov. Don't call.
Much worse than that.
No. Seriously though, don't call people idiots here. Tom, I'm really appreciative of the fact that you went here, and I want this stream to be more about challenging ideas than name calling. So let's everybody get on that same.
Yeah, I'm not coming on here to be set up by a bunch of people that are going to be calling me names this whole time.
No, you're absolutely right, Tom. I don't want to set you up. Please don't call him an idiot. Basically, I want to discuss the idea.
Please don't call him an idiot.
Let me add
Go
something.
for it.
I think that a lot of people are already on edge as a result of a lot of stuff that's going on, and so these type of conversations are always going to be a little bit difficult if people aren't willing to put themselves in the shoes of the person. So for me, for example, if I was in that boy's shoes and I was already ramped up to go out to a situation like this, there are people who would not defend themselves in that situation, and there are people who would defend themselves in that situation. I think that's I think it's a valid question for everybody to be aware of. If you're in a situation like that, do you defend yourself? Because really, in the Black community, we call them nigga moments. It's just like, okay, I don't know how I got here. I don't know how any of this happened. Now I'm stuck. Okay, so what am I going to actually do? Because that is a real thing. Like anytime I leave out my house, if I go to a party or something like that, I volunteered to go to the party. I may or may not be armed based on where I'm going as a Black person, and something could happen. I have to have a decision in my mind. Am I going to defend myself or am I not going to defend myself? So I think it's a valid question for people to address if they're willing to defend themselves if they find themselves in situations that they can't control, because it happens all the time. If I'm him, I'm probably thinking, how'd I even get in this? But at the same time, you're already in it. So if you're already in it, and the whole thing about crossing state lines, I'm in the DC metro area. Literally, DC, Maryland, Virginia are like 10 miles apart. I can be in 3 jurisdictions in 20 minutes. It's not a big deal. So I think that's also if you live in the middle of a state versus the, on state lines, it seems like a big deal. But I go to DC. I just came out of DC. Like I just went to Virginia. I go to Virginia all the time. It's not really a big, huge deal, if you live on the border. And that's another consideration to make. I mean, you don't necessarily think, oh, I'm crossing state lines with my gun if you're like going down the street 15 minutes. It's kind of like
I would drive 6 hours with a shotgun to defend my cousin's store if I felt it was in danger of getting burned down and I knew that would ruin him like instantly.
And was that the situation as far as, was it his cousin's store? What's the relationship?
No, but I'm just saying there's a number of hypothetical reasons he could have been there. He lived within a 16-mile drive of the city.
Yeah, so that is kind of different than people being sent out from far away. I mean, as far as going back to what decision you would make, I mean, Tom, even though you may come from a different ideas than some of the other panelists, I think we could agree on the fact that if you were in that position, regardless of how you got there, if you had a gun on you and people were trying to beat you up, you would defend yourself, or wouldn't you? Or would you let them beat you up?
But the whole question on this is completely skewed. The guy had every intention to put himself in the middle of this with a loaded gun, looking for something to do. I mean, if he
isn't that the case?
Why was
if I was
there?
in his position and putting myself standing out of it meant that something I loved got destroyed, I would.
He wasn't protecting anything. He put him in a situation that he knew was going to happen. This was going to happen.
Do we know that? Say that about all the rioters. You can say that about every one of the rioters.
I haven't heard that. I mean, I know that there are people saying these. I hear what you're saying, but I haven't actually heard that he purposely went there to kill people. I haven't heard that. I'm just watching commentary.
Can I ask you a question? So if he came there with a loaded gun and his intent was to kill people, what about everyone else there with a loaded gun?
I wasn't there. I don't know. All I know is the one kid. The one kid was there. He put himself in a situation where he knew would not be good.
Didn't everyone else there?
No, civil war happening.
I wasn't there. All I know is what happened.
Well, in one of the other videos of Kyle, where he was also a medic, he was also helping to treat people, or at least that's what was going on in the video, where somebody yelled out for a medic, and he went there. And from what I understand, he was defending the town's businesses as far as the gas station goes. And let's think back for a second to the LA riots, in the 1992 LA riots. Tom, if you were one of the Korean shopkeepers during the LA riots, what would you do?
I would lock my doors and get the hell out of there. It's a situation you shouldn't
have
be
your
involved
business
in.
be completely ruined.
What
have
are you
your
going to do?
livelihood?
Are you going to kill everybody?
Having a
Are you
business
going to shoot everybody that comes through that?
Comes through.
Absolutely.
If people are
Body
looting your
after
business, you got to
body
protect yourself,
enough to fill a lake.
and you have to
If it
protect.
is my way of making a livelihood, yes.
You got to protect the product
Absolutely.
of your labor. That's why we.
So I guess I misunderstood why we're here. We're here to affirm this guy's right to kill people at a rally or at a protest.
We're here to affirm.
At a riot.
It is a conversation.
I know,
different
but what is?
perspectives. And
So what's the right perspective that he was protecting
there's no
his
right
business?
Or wrong. No, there's no right or wrong in these.
What's
types
right
of
or wrong is that he
conversations.
killed 2 people.
Yeah, but they were child molesters. I would prefer not.
They were
to have
child molesters. He
molesters
didn't
on
have
the
any
street.
idea they were child molesters.
I mean,
God's will.
Well,
I know.
hold on.
Shit.
We're not okay.
But what a great random roll.
No, I
of
think
dice.
the deeper topic here is the question of self-defense and defense of one's property. This is something that I think is an integral part of the United States of America, the fact that we are able to have private property and defend it. So I guess the question is, where do we draw the line between allowing people to loot property, allowing people to destroy property, and being able to defend yourself? So from your perspective, Tom, if I understood you correctly, you would, if you were the Korean shop owner back in the LA riots, you would run away, you would leave your store.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this is a whole different situation than the riots in LA. This guy injected himself in the situation. None of it was his personal property. He chose to go there to cause trouble. He was an instigator.
And no one else went there to cause trouble or instigate.
Nobody else killed 2 people.
Well, that anyone who goes there with a loaded gun has the potential to kill people. Just because it was him doesn't mean that he went there with the intention to do it. Like I understand.
What we're trying to say
There's a situation where there's buildings burning down, the cops aren't doing anything,
bullshit.
and there's people that absolutely hate each other on the streets. I mean, something's bound to happen, regardless of who finds themselves in what position.
I understand what you're saying, Tom.
In that situation.
Yes.
Tom,
He wasn't from that community.
I understand what you're saying, and you are right. It's a bad idea to go with a loaded gun to a protest, like you said, where Shantyman said, where people are hating each other and there's obvious lethal tension. It's a bad idea to do that.
Which he had
especially
no
if you're a
reason
kid.
to be there.
Okay, you're correct. He had no reason to be there, but no one else had any reason to be there either. If anyone on either side goes there with a loaded gun, then if a shooting is going to happen.
Everyone's kind of buying into the pot, when they go out the door with that decision to,
yes,
that's the way I look at it.
He went there with a loaded gun, but so did how many other people? That in itself is not an incriminating factor.
What are the gun
Really?
rules in Wisconsin anyway?
He was actually perfectly allowed to open carry a rifle to the protest under Wisconsin state gun
Okay,
laws.
so in Wisconsin you can't open carry because Maryland you
No,
can't.
he can. He was perfectly allowed to. Perfectly legal.
That's what I was wondering.
I just can't wait to defund the police so that more decent people can start showing up to these things and handling it themselves.
Well, that's what do you guys think about that? How when those people were shot, the same people calling to defund the police,
To be honest, I thought this would have been something that would have happened sooner than 3 months into a sequence of riots where cops appear to be standing down.
Well,
I'm surprised it took almost to the cusp of September.
It's shocking how close to you the danger has to get before you start to give a shit, and we still haven't seen people start to give a shit, I believe.
No, I think this is good. I think this is basically just one threshold being crossed. I think this is the first real thing where I've seen, someone shooting rioters, a vigilante style kind of interaction and people dying from it. I think now that that's been broken, pressure's building up to the election. You'll see more.
Well, you have had in Atlanta, you did have armed black people kicking out protesters that tried to come into their neighborhood. So it's not, I don't think it hasn't happened at all. I just think that it hasn't been in a situation where you have like the people
You've had
St. Louis, they weren't also armed, you know, and right. It is, I think that it's, you know, it's just different when you have people on the streets and they're not actually defending their homes. But yeah, I also think the carry laws in California, Minnesota, and Washington State have probably prevented there from being people doing this. I mean, I remember hearing about in Tennessee or something, like they tried the protesters had tried to go into a neighborhood and people held them back. In some other states, but they were open carry or concealed carry states where people just saw the guns and were like, well, I guess this is probably a bad idea. But there's a guy that I follow on Twitter that's just been saying for months that, you know, guns are not going to protect you, because even if you have, I mean, they'll protect you if you can kill everyone, but people are just, they're in like a dream state. So the fact that you know, open, you know, a gun and show it to them, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stop advancing, or it's going to actually prevent violence, because people are just so emotionally wrecked right now. And I just put the blame on this solely on the media, because they've just been reporting all of this stuff nonstop, you know, while keeping people trapped in their houses for months. I mean, eventually somebody is going to have a break. And I'm actually surprised there hasn't been a break sooner than this.
It's surprising that it's just happening now, honestly.
Well, Tom, would you also blame the media for causing a lot of this heat that people are feeling right now?
Sure. The media is in this to make money. I mean, if they can show somebody shooting somebody, what makes more money? I mean, but one thing we have to ask, I mean, is any of this right? I mean, it's not right that the guy had a carry permit to go into there. I mean, you have to think about.
You don't need a permit. You can just carry openly.
Okay.
It's in the state constitution.
Why was he there with a gun? Why do we allow this kind of thing?
We're like way past these arguments. I think we all know exactly why all these are happening and why they can't be stopped, and why this is the new normal, as they say.
I don't think it's the new normal. I think we're going to come back from this, because I don't think this is sustainable. Everyday regular people are seeing this and saying, this is nuts. This is completely insane. You have, it's always, you know, a small group of angry people that are the loudest, but really this could have been stopped if the National Guard had been sitting there with some active denial technology to make everybody feel like their skin is on fire, and everybody would have ran away. The military could have stopped this.
Well,
so
Sophia,
we're blaming the wrong people.
Just because something is unsustainable doesn't mean that people don't go in on it full throttle. I would point, you know, given my experience and my reading of Chad Haig and Kaczynski, you know, you can look to something like our technological society or our use of fossil fuels, where everyone knows inherently the way that we live and the way that we support the way we live is not sustainable, yet it's what people want. So they're going to keep doing it until they can't anymore. It has nothing to do with sustainability, in my opinion. And people there, like on both sides, there are people who are absolutely gunning for every law, everything to break down so that we can finally just, you know, take arms. And so that, I mean, think about it. Who are the people that are involved in this? We have a 17-year-old young man who, you know, obviously had a predilection towards firearms. And then we have, on both sides, we have people who are the dregs of society. We have pedophiles. In this case, it happened to be on the Democrat side or the BLM side. But we have pedophiles, felons, and those are on both sides, I'm sure. But we have people who this society hasn't catered to them, or it's not been successful to them in the way that they want, and they see an opportunity to change things around through the language that everyone understands, which is violence. And I think we're just at the cusp of seeing what this is all going to come to. Like this isn't like outrageous to me. I don't see how someone could look and see where we are. And
honestly, it reminds me of like when the late 60s started to turn ugly. Like Chicago, Detroit, like New Jersey, that kind of stuff.
So these things do come in cycle in a way, but the Democratic Party, I think, they're in a really strange situation right now, because when it comes to winning the election, the side that is much more, let's say, social justice oriented, they are the side that are going to be in favor of things like defund the police, things like, not having any problem with a lot of these protests and riots that have been going on. So if you are an official of the Democratic Party, what choice do you really have other than to cater to those elements? Because if you don't cater to those elements, if you clamp down the iron boot in the cities, then that whole side of all of those people are not going to vote for you. So, like, if you were in the Democratic Party, what would you even do at this point?
They dug a terrible hole for themselves, and I've been saying since the lockdown started, I don't know how you get out of this, because and it's not just Democrats, it's a lot of people who have just allowed the protests to go unchecked while telling everyday Americans you can't go to work, you can't do anything, you can't leave your house, you can't have fun. Now you have to go with a mask, mask everywhere. I mean, it's a situation where there's no way to win this situation. There's no winning. Like, I don't know what.
Tom, is there a way to win this situation?
Well, for one thing, Democrats aren't propagating the idea of violent protest.
No, I didn't say propagating. I said that they're not clamping down on it. We can both agree on that, correct?
Well, we can agree that they can't control it, but protests and demonstrations are in the Constitution. It's how things are changed.
De Blasio controlled it here in New York City.
Can they win this?
Well,
how do they win this?
What should they do? I mean, they can't control some idiot with a gun. I mean, but you have the right to protest, right?
De Blasio could have controlled the amount of violence that was going on in New York City. NYPD is at the level of certain militaries in other countries. They could have been able to contain and control whatever violence would have occurred there.
They could control that kid when they could have controlled that kid in Kenosha when he walked by him.
Let's not change the subject, though, because this is a very important distinction.
If walking by that cops with a gun, he'd have been stopped in a minute.
If we would have gone full martial law, let's say, in New York City, when the slightest hint of a riot would have occurred, then if you were in de Blasio's place, you would have had the power to get the NYPD to break everything up and to do it with a lot of energy. That was not done. That was not done in these other states as well, which brings me to the conclusion that the use of force to suppress these riots was not something that figured into the overall strategy of the leaders of those particular districts.
Well, I think anytime there's a riot, that's to be shut down. But if it's a legal protest, you can't shut that down.
Sure,
I mean,
but
how many buildings you got to fucking burn, dude? How many buildings got to burn?
Come on.
No, but
they weren't.
We can't ignore that.
Buildings being burned down.
Tom,
I mean,
seriously though, we cannot ignore that these things were happening. I mean, regardless of whatever stance you take politically, there were riots.
One of the guys he killed literally
burned.
threw a Molotov at him.
Okay, no, to be fair, that was not a Molotov. That was like a bag with a bottle upon further inspection. But besides that, there were so many lootings and burnings and riots that were happening. Tom, we can't live in separate worlds when it comes to that. We can both agree that these things happened, correct?
Right. They happen and they're not good.
Exactly. So my point here is that because we're aware that they're happening, and if we're looking at these leaders of these states and cities, if they're not sending out the iron boot to clamp down on the first iteration of it happening, then I'm sorry, but that stinks. That stinks to me, and Tom, I would be really surprised if it wouldn't stink to you, regardless of whatever political affiliation you have.
Right. I don't think that there should be riots and buildings being burnt.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not their intent. When those people go out there, they're not intending to burn buildings.
But then would you put the blame on these leaders of these districts and cities and states then? Because they are the ones, let's face it, who are responsible for the iron boot not being clamped down when these riots were going on. Tom, we both agree that this happened. So can we both just say, fuck those people?
I guess I don't understand what the iron boot is. There's police in every one of those.
The National Guard and the federal law enforcement.
Exactly. But even besides the federal law enforcement, NYPD, that's not federal law enforcement, but that is, like I said before, the size of certain armies. All I'm saying, Tom, is that if you have this kind of this kind of force at your disposal, and you're noticing just like one store being looted, one store, just one little store, then that's it. You call them in and you set order. So my point again is that since these districts were not setting order then to me, I am going to place the blame directly on the politicians who are in charge here. And Tom, I don't care what your political affiliation is, it has zero to do with it. If I were you, I would make a big FU middle finger to de Blasio and to the Chicago mayor and to all these people who have failed in their duties to protect private property of their citizenry. I think we can both agree on that regardless of any political affiliation here.
I just don't understand. You can see all of these fucking buildings burning, and they're still calling it peaceful. They're fucking sitting there saying fiery but peaceful protest, and then you're shocked when people show up with guns. And like, there's no good or bad. There's no deciding whether this is good or bad. This is just what's happening. And if you can't understand it, you just throw your hands up in the air. I don't know, man. I wouldn't even bother trying to have some sort of analysis on this because you're way behind.
No, but
Tommy, do you want me to respond to that, or are you just going to jump on it?
No. I don't want anybody to jump on it. Please respond, Tom.
I mean, why respond to it? I mean,
no, not even.
I can't control what happens in the things. I can't say that every time there's a peaceful protest that they should, just think that there's something bad going to happen. So just put down the boot. I mean, you still have to let these protests happen.
If they're
the
peaceful,
whole reason
absolutely.
these happen is because
there is.
That's the thing.
It can turn from
you guys are
angry.
more worried about burning buildings than the fucking poor guy.
My country is burning.
Knee. How about the guy that had the fucking knee on his throat and died?
Oh, he OD'd on fentanyl. Fuck him.
Response to that.
Yeah, he OD'd on fentanyl when you saw the toxicology report.
We cannot talk
what's
about
happening
that.
every goddamn day because of it.
No, we cannot talk about that because that is
yeah, we
way
can.
too
That's
much.
the whole reason
I'd
for
love
these protests.
No, it's too because we can't even agree on the fact that they were rioting in Kenosha. We're not even on the same page as that.
The guy in Kenosha was shot in the back and killed, and still no one's been arrested for it.
Okay.
So maybe, I would be upset too.
Okay,
if I lived there.
Actually,
that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
Blake?
I'm talking about George Floyd.
He wasn't killed.
We can't even
I'm
agree
not talking
on...
about George Floyd. I'm talking about the guy in Kenosha that was killed.
Blake?
Okay,
Is that
so
him?
it was that situation.
He's dead. He's not dead.
There's still
Well,
a
he's
lot
shot,
that's
okay?
not known about that. I don't think he should have been shot. I think the police were probably a little bit too aggressive, but I live in an over-policed area, and they do this all the time. People are always getting shot by the police. If you live in a black area with a bunch of black people, the police are always over-policing. That's a regular, normal part of life. But I don't think they should be allowed to do that. However, as a result of that, you have people were not just peaceful protesting in Kenosha. They were rioting. We saw for 3 or 4 nights, places were on fire. This poor lady was crying in her car lot in her furniture factory. People who watch the news have seen this. So if we can't agree that there were riots in Kenosha, we're still talking about protests when there were places, lots and lots of places on fire. I don't know how we can, we gotta agree on something. I mean, that's a problem that I always have talking to even people in my community. We can't even agree on the facts. You see something burning and you don't say that, you say it's a protest, but I saw something burning on TV. You saw it burning, you don't think it's a protest. I mean, it's a riot when people are burning.
But it started as a protest.
But this is why I keep saying it's a war over and over, because there's a civil war. We're not going to agree, and now we're shooting at each other. So there is that.
Like, I mean, the point where it crosses over from a protest to a riot, like, it's very easy to do. It can be done by one person. Like, I remember watching a documentary about the LA riots, and the thing that set most people off was it had been a very dry summer, and one guy literally just rolled up a magazine, lit the tip, and walked up one of the main boulevards, just lighting every one of the bone-dry palm trees on fire. Everyone saw like 24 of them burn. They're just like, fuck it, might as well. Like, it's pretty easy to do. And judging from the background of like what's going on in the footage there's fire going on, there's smoke, there's things happening. Like, I think it had already crossed to that point in the night.
And what makes me very uncomfortable is that you have, let's say, at least from what I was able to see on a lot of Resist Twitter accounts, people don't really talk about these riots. People don't criticize these leaders because they happen to all be in the same tribe on the same team. I really wish that there would be someone like Tom. This could be something that you could do, where you could be someone who would be able to be fair-minded and also speak the truth about these problems that are going on with these riots, while at the same time condemning senseless violence. I think that there is room for both things to be done. I just find this tribalism to be exhausting, which is exactly why I wanted to reach out to you.
I agree. I mean, I never think that a riot is good, but as someone that was actually alive during the LA riots, a lot was changed because of those riots. The LA Police Department was completely redone because of this. And the reason for those riots is because people were tired of what was going on. I mean, those Latinos and black people in LA were tired of it. And they had no other way to do anything besides riot. I mean, they backed them into the corner where that was the only position that they could take. I mean,
so is that the
they were bad.
today?
They were bad, and a lot of people were hurt. But when you put people in a corner and you don't give them any outlet, they're going to do things like this. I mean, there's only so much people can take.
Though? I mean, I'm curious.
I don't know.
Do people think that this is their only?
But if I saw every day on the media somebody being killed by the police, I think that I would be in the position where I would, I don't know.
Well, let's go back to Blake. Let's go back to Blake for a second. When that occurred, if you were to all of a sudden, Tom or Sophia, take your soul and possess the spirit of one of the officers and you took a time machine there, right? And if you saw that Blake was reaching for something in his car, it didn't matter what it was at that point. You don't know what it was. But if you were in that position, what would you do?
Well, if I was the officer, since I've seen a lot of these situations, there's a lot of different types of training that they could have that would prevent them from engaging in shoot first or even shoot second or even shoot third tactics. The military has a lot of training where the first thing they do is not pull their gun, or the second thing, or some of them don't even carry weapons. They have other ways of disarming people that are just as effective and don't actually necessarily kill people. So my thing is, I think the officers need more training. There should be, like Trump suggested, the nationwide database and a nationwide certification where they can get training to deal with these situations so that they're not, pulling a gun is not even a solution. And another thing.
What happens is when Democrats try to make that conversation, all of a sudden it's defund the police. And that's not exactly what they're saying. They're not saying defund the police. They're saying
the protesters are.
The protesters
so nobody's saying defund the police.
No, the
protesters
are.
Absolutely. No, they're not.
They absolutely
are.
I am in complete agreement.
If you want to talk about media, that's your media bias is a defund the police.
On my timeline, black people I know are saying defund the police all day. All day they tweet defund the police.
Yeah.
I report as many of them as I can. They say defund the police.
Yeah, Cortez is talking about it. A lot of other leaders are. But here's the thing. I completely agree with what Hotep Sophia just said. If that's what the protests would have been about, like, let's get police in better training, in a better state where we wouldn't have this senseless violence going on, I'm absolutely 100% for that. I am originally from the USSR.
I am too.
And I noticed that a lot of the tactics that are being done right now are tactics like Antifa and the rest of the communists, like all of that is textbook agitation technology. And it's something that exactly. And this is something that I've been noticed happening whenever somebody, let's say, has a great idea as far as, hey, we can improve the way these things are done. All of a sudden, all this other shit is piled on top of it, having to do with overthrowing the justice system, the way that it works. And I'm sorry, Tom, but this is something that I've noticed tremendously happening these past couple of months with the raised fists and all that. Like, this is all communist bullshit. And I am very infuriated that something that could result in a better future for all of us with less people getting killed has been infiltrated, probably from the very beginning, with all of this communist agitprop.
What do you want me to say? I mean, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that whole basis of what you're trying to say. I don't think this has been any of it. I mean,
well, let's break it down. I want to break it down.
Okay. That you think that the protests are brought on by Antifa and communists?
I think that these are the elements that end up
We're gonna
going
bring
into.
George Soros
They end
into
up
this
giving.
conversation too.
These are the. Not, we can bring in Russia into this. I'm originally from Russia, and I know that the Russian Federation puts in a lot of money into doing this kind of agitprop as well. So if you're talking about #resist Twitter being against Putin, I am very much against Putin. I think he's a horrible, horrible dictator. And I know that the Russian government has been funneling a lot of money into breaking Americans apart, into creating a lot of this chaos as well. So let's just forget about George Soros for a second.
Right.
So when it comes to destabilization, this is a game that so many different bad actors could play, and they could fund Antifa, who ends up going out there, who ends up destroying shops, who end up destroying, people's livelihoods. And I'm sorry, but that's only going to make people more divided. And that has nothing to do with having a nice protest where everybody's on the same page about police reform.
Why don't we talk about, on this little meeting here, why don't we talk about things to make things better? I mean, I know I'm the token liberal here and you guys can take your shots at me, but what are we going to do to make things better?
No, I really appreciate you coming in here, and we are going to have more liberal and more left-leaning people coming in here.
I doubt it after they see this.
No, I welcome everybody. I mean, look, Tom, I was defending you here, right? Like, I made sure that everybody was good.
I'm good.
So I
good.
really appreciate you being here, man. So, yeah, that's a good question. Well, Shantyman, you were reading this book about, the prediction of a coming civil war. Do you think that there is any way to offset this, or if not, what do you see happening down the road?
I mean, the way that I would see it is, not happening would be hopelessly ideal. I think there is really two halves of America that fundamentally in worldview are irreconcilable. And if there can be a divorce between them somehow, that might be for the best. I don't know how to work it otherwise. However, trying to get like all these people in this country who have the way I look at it, it can't be reconciled. They're going to come to a head, or one is going to dominate the other, and it's going to be that way or the highway. And the way I see it, we're already well on the path to that coming to a head with this election that I see.
Isn't that the Kali Yuga? Isn't that?
Yeah.
Tom, do you know about the Kali Yuga?
No.
Okay, so in the Hindu mythology, they believe that a lot of these things come in cycles, and we are currently living in the Kali Yuga, which is supposed to be the worst of these cycles, which is supposed to be the age with the most bloodshed, with the most violence, with the most misery. But then eventually, right after the Kali Yuga, comes the Satya Yuga, and Satya means truth, where
golden.
If we are exact golden as well. That's interesting. Golden and truth. So when it comes to us being so divided, the opposite, I think, would happen when we would be able to, hopefully through the kind of conversations we're having right now, be able to reach out to each other and, figure out like where we all stand and where we can go from here. And maybe that's going to lead eventually into a Satya Yuga. So that's about the Yugas. But is there...
Sounds like a deal.
I hope it is. I think it definitely will be. But how about yourself, Yakov, and Hotep Sophia, and Serpent Mound? Would you have anything to add on as far as what we can do to, come out of this in a better way?
I think we got to push through this chaos as fast and as horrifying as possible. We have to obliterate all of our understanding of duality in a fucking glorious rain of blood, and then we will realize that we are all just drops of God from the ocean of God.
I was going to live on a mountain and smoke my meat. I mean,
let me grill for God's sakes.
Yeah, let me smoke my beef. Bye.
We have to push through this. I think that eventually, sooner than later, more people will be aware of the truth than people who are unaware of the truth. And as the truth reveals itself, I think we're already to the tipping point, which is why things are sort of starting to get bad. And I think that as long as we, the people who are seeking the truth and the people who are seeking some sort of resolution continues to push in that direction, we'll get there. Because a real solution to this is like full disclosure of all the stuff that, is being misled by the media and, the prison government industrial complex. So I think the sooner people will become aware of what is actually happening, the better it is. And I think Yakov is right. This is get through this as hard and as fast as possible. People will realize they don't want to get shot and be like, oh, maybe this whole thing is not really the way to address the situation. You know what I mean? Like I don't think millions of people have to be murdered in the streets for people to at least do a double think and say, well, if I go out here and shoot somebody defending myself, I have a right to defend myself, but then I'm still going to have to deal with this jail thing and da-da-da-da. Once people have to see the whole realm of consequences that happens when you defend yourself, whether you're right or you're wrong, I think you'll have more people say, I'm not even going to take this risk on both sides, because we know both sides had guns. So I think people will start, and as long as people who are agitators, the real agitators, are put in jail for 10 years like they're supposed to be, that will take a lot of the agitators off the streets on both sides. And then you'll see people will be able to have conversations. But I think another solution is people do have to try to talk to each other and try to find common ground, which is extremely difficult when, like Shantyman said, seems like we're living in two different sections of reality. And I often find that I'm talking to people who are like, you know, they just don't even exist in the world that I'm describing. I'm like, what are you talking about? You sound crazy, like my dad. I'm like, Dad, where'd you get this information from? And most of the time it's from the media. I think full destruction of the media would really, really go very far in helping us. But
I think if we fired all the newscasters and all the politicians, it'd go a long way.
Do you have to stop it firing them? I think maybe out of a cannon, per se.
Out of a Minecraft cannon, yes.
Minecraft. I'm all for guillotines, but I think something has to, people have to rise up. But the weapon of this weapon, here's the judicially recognized evidence. I think that, you have some of these people drop out, some of these people will shut up, some of these people go away. I think what we have left are the people who can't. On both sides, they're so involved. Like a Lindsey Graham, he can't go anywhere. He's so involved with this stuff up to his eyeballs that as soon as he takes a pinky toe step out, all of his stuff that he's holding together falls apart, So I think that we have people like that on all sides. If Gavin Newsom takes a pinky toe step out of California politics, it's going to be a whole lot that just falls apart. So I think that, I would use a Sonic reference, but we have the big balls. That's who we're fighting now. And
Dr.
as soon as
Robotnik?
Dr. Robotnik. As soon as we get rid of Dr. Robotnik, then we can go on to the next stage, which I don't think the next stage is going to be any more fun, to be honest, because you do have two giant sections of people who have no idea what the other is talking about. About anything.
Well, the Dr. Robotnik, even if you get rid of one Robotnik, another Robotnik is going to take that place because it's about a gap of power, which is why, Tom, going back to what we were talking about earlier, when it comes to districts who are not able to defend themselves, and let's say, and again, let's just for the sake of argument say that enough politicians in certain districts would vote in favor, which they already have in certain places, like I believe in Minnesota this has happened, for defunding for transferring the funds of the police to other services. So what would happen in that situation, hypothetically, let's say, when there would not be enough police to defend yourself, you would have to enlist, let's say, certain mafia organizations, certain people who are going to be in the streets with guns defending your neighborhood, like it kind of was in the old days, if we're talking about like the old Italian-American neighborhoods in New York. Like a lot of the reason the mafia came about was that they were defending their turf. And by the way, the same thing is happening in California today when it comes to the Mexican migrants there, who have their own people who made sure that the rioters did not get into their streets and cause trouble. So that is an example of society, figuring out amongst itself, do we want to get robbed? Do we want to get beaten up? No, sir. So what are we going to do? If there aren't going to be any police to do it for us, then we're going to have to use the people who are around us. I mean, what other way is there?